335i, we need to talk. I think we should see other people. It's not you, it's me. I'd like to stay friends. I don't want to hold you back from leaking oil all over someone else's garage. On this episode of Eat, Sleep, Drive, my 335 and I are parting ways. But how much did it cost me to own for 8 months, and was it worth it? Stay tuned to find out. What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of Eat, Sleep, Drive. And breakups are never easy, are they? Well, breaking up with my 335 is no exception, and that's what's happening today. The new owner is coming to pick it up in a few hours, and actually this car's been pretty reliable for me, although I still own it for a few more hours, so maybe I shouldn't say that. But in all seriousness, this has been a great car for me. It hasn't really broken down too many times outside of just doing a regular maintenance job and then just dealing with typical BMW things. But that's what I wanted to cover today. I want to talk about all the things that have broken on this car, how much it's cost me to own, and was it worth it? What are my final thoughts on the 335i? So let's talk first about how much it cost me to own this car. Now, I'm not going to go into details as far as like tax and insurance, because first of all, that stuff varies widely from person to person and region to region. And also, we're just treating this as like you could buy a $16,000 Camry or you could buy a $16,000 BMW. All that stuff is pretty much going to be the same. This is just the stuff that would be different because it's a BMW, things break, right? So let's dive into what broke and how much it cost me. The first thing that broke is in here, the oil filter housing gaskets. These are like decade-old problems that BMW continues to produce oil filter housing gaskets that leak. Like it's been going on in 3 Series and, well, really all their cars for a long time now. And this car was no exception. When I bought the car, the oil filter housing gasket was already leaking, and I knew that it was fine. I made a video on how to fix it. It's really not too bad. It takes a couple hours of your time. And fortunately, the gaskets are super cheap. The gaskets themselves, there are 2 of them in the oil filter housing gasket. I replaced both. Were $19 combined. Once again, super cheap. While I was at it, because I was dealing with the oil and all that stuff, I wanted to just do an oil change so everything was fresh. Oil change ran me another $31 for the oil and filter. So all in, I was like 50 bucks right when I bought the car, just kind of getting it up to speed. Now the next thing I had to fix on this car, go figure, was another gasket. This time it was the valve cover gasket, and the symptoms I was having for this one were I would go for a drive, and then towards the end of the drive, there would be white smoke coming from the engine bay and the smell of burning oil. After looking around in my engine bay, what I found was the valve cover was leaking and then dripping down on the turbo downpipe, causing it to obviously smoke and all that kind of stuff. So this one was a little more involved than the oil filter housing gasket. It took me longer to replace and was slightly more expensive at $29. But once again, a gasket, if you're willing to fix it yourself, relatively cheap. All in, it cost me $79 to fix the items needed for this car to own it for 8 months. Not bad. Now comes the most important aspect of car ownership cost, and that is how much I bought it for versus how much I sold it for. Now, admittedly, I am selling this at the worst time of year. It is winter in the Midwest. So first of all, not many people buy cars in the winter in the Midwest, and they certainly aren't shopping for rear-wheel drive performance cars. So this is not how you should do it. I just really want to get into a new project, so I figured I would test the market and see what I could get for the car. Now, the guy that's coming to buy it here in a couple hours has agreed to a price for $1,000 less than I paid for it 8 months ago. So I'm down $1,000 on the sale of the car. Keep in mind that if I were to wait till spring, I'm pretty confident that I could get much closer to the original figure that I paid for this car. But for me, I'm just ready to move on, so I'm willing to take that $1,000 loss. But that combines to $1,079 for the cost of the car depreciation-wise and the cost to fix it. And that is $134 a month if you break it down by month of ownership for a F30 BMW 335i. In full disclosure, I did also blow the charge pipe on this car, although it happened immediately after the car was tuned, running way more boost than stock, so I maintain it would have been fine if I would have just left it alone. Now that we've talked about what this car cost for me to own, let's talk about the ownership experience as a whole, or what I've enjoyed about this car. Now, you can look at my previous videos if you want a more in-depth sort of review on a F30 335i, but let's talk about what I enjoyed about this car during ownership. It is a fantastic commuter car, and that's pretty much primarily what I use it for. What I'm doing right now is commuting on the highway. It annihilates highways like all performance BMWs do. I absolutely love the way that they just they're made for the Autobahn, right? So doing 80 miles an hour in the States is absolutely nothing to these cars. It's quiet, it's composed, and it's very powerful. This is a very powerful engine, very underrated stock at 300 horsepower, definitely way closer to 300 at the wheels than a lot of manufacturers. And with this generation, they extended the wheelbase a little bit. The F30, they widened the wheelbase by like 2 inches, and it definitely made a noticeable difference over my E90 as far as ride quality. The ZF 8-speed transmission cannot be understated. As far as automatics go, it's just wonderful. Great manners at low speed, which is something that you don't get with a lot of dual clutches, but shifts damn near as fast as a dual clutch. So I'm getting off the highway here, and it's so nice just to put my foot down and this thing just goes. Transmission is perfectly mated to this engine. It's wonderful. So that's what this car is. What isn't the F30? The F30 is not the E90. It's not the previous generation. Gone are the days of exceptional chassis dynamics, just wonderful steering. It's still pretty good, but the steering is direct but has zero feel to it. The chassis is decent, but kind of wallows about when you really start to push it. It doesn't have that inherent balance that the E90 had. And that's sort of a bummer, because BMW used to lead the class, used to be about legitimate, ultimate driving machines. And this one is just, it's a step backwards, unfortunately, in dynamics. So what it is a comfortable, fast, executive, I'll say a little bit, commuter. What it is not is like a full-blown sports car. So you really have to temper your expectations when you're going into this car, and it really depends what you're looking for ultimately. Once again, I use this to commute, and it's a wonderful car for that. It's been pretty reliable for me, which is something that you can't say for the older N54 E90 cars. So temper your expectations. If you want a great, cheap luxury car that is mildly sporty, it's hard to go wrong with. One other interesting thing of note is that as I flip through my screens here, I can see the lifetime MPG, at least for when I've had it, which is just under 25 miles to the gallon. Incredible for a 300 horsepower sports sedan. I think that's really, really good. On the highway, I've seen 30 miles to the gallon legitimately when I've taken this thing on road trips, but I mostly do mixed driving for my way to work, so that's why it's quite a bit lower, but that's pretty good in my opinion, given the performance of the engine, but it's also pretty efficient. Well, it's time for me to drop this car off for the future owner. JP, I hope you enjoy the car. He's the one that is buying it and driving it back to Illinois. This car has been just a series of people buying it remotely and then either flying or driving home. It's definitely a desirable car in the combination with the sport package and stuff like that, and I'm gonna miss it. I only have so much room in my garage, would love to keep it around, but let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Have you enjoyed the 335i videos? I know I've done a decent amount of them, but in the future, I hope to be hitting you guys with an even more exciting car, so stay tuned for that. You could speculate what that will be, but once again, I appreciate you guys watching, and I will see you on the next episode of Eat, Sleep, Drive. See you guys.